How is it possible that Lewis Hamilton's most important message has been silenced by his own team? What seemed like a simple radio disconnection could actually be evidence of an internal conspiracy to silence his voice just when he most needed to be heard. Is Mercedes manipulating the narrative to protect hidden interests? This revelation not only shakes the team's foundations, but leaves a terrifying question hanging in the air. Who is really in charge at Mercedes, the driver or the engineers? The Formula One world stood still earlier this week when a message, never before heard by the public, finally surfaced, and it came from none other than Lewis Hamilton. What was supposed to be a routine exchange with his engineer has now become the subject of intense speculation, as insiders claim the recording was deliberately withheld from live broadcasts and post-session transcripts. The message, described by some close to the paddock as too honest for television, allegedly reveals Hamilton's mounting frustration with internal dynamics that had remained hidden from fans. But what exactly did he say? And why was it kept secret? According to team sources, the audio exposes not only a tactical disagreement, but something far more personal, a glimpse into the strained relationship between the seven-time world champion and his longtime engineer, who many believed shared unshakable trust. This revelation has led to a frenzy among analysts and fans alike, wondering if the partnership that once defined stability and precision is now quietly crumbling under pressure. The timing of this leak is particularly suspicious, as rumors of tension behind closed doors at the Scuderia have been bubbling for weeks. And now, with Hamilton's voice breaking through the static, those whispers are turning into something louder. A possible internal rupture that could redefine the future of one of Formula One's most iconic duos. What makes Lewis Hamilton's leaked message even more significant is not just the tone, it is the timing and the content. According to a senior technician from the team, who spoke under condition of anonymity, the conversation was recorded during a closed test session at FERRARI. This was no ordinary moment. It happened during one of the most critical phases of data correlation, when Hamilton was pushing the limits of the updated aero package that Maranello had been promoting as a new chapter in their development. His message to the engineer, whose identity has not been confirmed officially but is believed to be Riccardo Adami, was clear and blunt. "I cannot keep pretending this is working." That single sentence, reportedly followed by a long pause and a frustrated sigh, sent waves through the engineering bay. And yet, this exchange never made it to the standard radio debriefs released to the public. Why would a team known for transparency choose to hide this particular moment? Some insiders suggest that Hamilton's growing dissatisfaction with the car's development direction has not been met with adequate responses, and this message could have shown the world just how far the disconnect has grown. Others believe that the team feared public backlash or a narrative that might suggest internal disarray, something Maranello has worked hard to deny since the beginning of this season. But whether it was censored for strategy or image control, the effect is the same. The silence around it has only amplified its significance. And now that the words have surfaced, the question is no longer what was said, but why was it hidden at all? As the story surrounding Lewis Hamilton's unheard message to his engineer continues to unfold, many have begun to connect the dots between this transmission and a series of subtle, yet telling decisions made within the Maranello camp over the last few months. Since the beginning of the technical restructuring under Frédéric Vasseur, there has been a noticeable shift in the communication protocol between drivers and engineers. Several observers pointed out how Hamilton, known for his meticulous debriefs and technical clarity, has seemed increasingly distant in post-session interviews. While the official statements painted a picture of optimism, the body language and choice of words suggested otherwise. During a recent interview with a German publication, Hamilton was asked directly whether he felt listened to by the engineering department. His reply, calm but loaded, was, "I do not think that is a question I can answer honestly right now." That reply, almost ignored at the time, now gains a much sharper edge in light of the private message that has surfaced. The nature of the message, firm, restrained, and yet undeniably emotional, reveals the depth of Hamilton's concerns about the direction the SF25 has taken. Reports have emerged suggesting that several of the adjustments Hamilton recommended during simulator sessions in Maranello were either delayed or disregarded entirely in favor of solutions pushed by aerodynamic consultants brought in from outside the original team structure. This has sparked internal tension, especially considering that many of those external suggestions were influenced by data from the other driver's feedback, Charles Leclerc, which might not align with Hamilton's driving style. In fact, according to one technician from the chassis department, the current setup philosophy is closer to Charles' preferences, but that leaves Lewis with a car that talks to him in a language he never learned. That quote alone hints at a deeper cultural clash inside Maranello, one where two visions of car development, one rooted in experience and technical adaptability, the other in raw speed and aggressive input, are starting to collide. If that message was Louis Hamilton's attempt to wave a red flag before the car became politically untouchable, then the fact it was buried raises uncomfortable questions about whose voices matter most in this supposedly unified project. The deeper one delves into the full implications of what Louis Hamilton said in that private message, the more it becomes evident that this was not merely an emotional outburst, nor a coded strategy discussion. It was something far more telling. According to a senior insider who has been part of several championship-winning teams, Hamilton's phrasing and the tone he used hinted at a deep fracture in trust that had not been previously acknowledged in public. It was not just about a moment of technical confusion or an engineering miscalculation. It was about a pilot confronting what he perceived as a consistent pattern of being let down. Hamilton made direct reference to what he called systemic hesitations within the communication protocols, a phrase that suggests he believes there are internal inefficiencies or even people working against cohesion. This was further amplified when, moments after his unheard message was logged and archived, his engineer's reply was notably terse and lacked the usual feedback loop that characterizes their radio exchanges. Analysts who have studied years of telemetry and radio recordings between Hamilton and his engineering teams noticed a sharp deviation from their standard interaction dynamics. One particularly striking detail was how Hamilton paused before speaking, almost as if weighing the risk of saying what he truly felt. That pause, which lasted nearly 3 seconds, has now become a point of analysis among specialists in team dynamics. They believe it indicates premeditation and an awareness that what he was about to say would have long-term repercussions. The fact that this message was not immediately made public raises even more questions about how much control teams truly have over the narrative, and how many critical moments in a pilot's career remain buried inside encrypted audio files and silent corridors of the paddock. As the implications of Louis Hamilton's unheard message began to circulate among those with access to internal recordings, several engineers and team members from rival garages reportedly took a sudden and renewed interest in his communication logs. Not because they were searching for technical details, those were heavily redacted, but because the emotional subtext of that message suggested something rarely witnessed in modern motorsport. A 7-time world champion losing confidence in the system designed to protect and amplify his performance. According to a confidential source familiar with the inner workings of Mercedes, there had been signs of internal conflict long before this message. Disagreements over telemetry interpretations, questions about tire degradation timing, and even subtle disputes over strategic decision-making had been festering quietly. But none of these issues had made it into the public eye, until now. When Hamilton spoke about intelligence being ignored and voices being filtered, many began to speculate that he was alluding not just to his own experience, but to broader decisions being overridden at a higher level. Some interpreted his message as a veiled accusation directed at the data unit inside Mercedes, suggesting that not all engineering feedback was being processed equally. This has sparked intense debate across technical forums, where former engineers from teams like Red Bull and Ferrari have weighed in. One even went as far as to claim that what Hamilton described in his message, filtered communication and top-down overrides, is standard practice when a team's leadership begins to distrust its pilot. If true, that revelation would not only explain Hamilton's outburst, but also expose the kind of silent political struggles that plague elite-level garages. Hamilton, often praised for his loyalty and emotional intelligence, seems to have reached a tipping point where diplomacy was no longer sufficient. His silence on the matter since that message only intensifies the speculation. Was this an isolated moment of frustration, or has he quietly declared war on elements within his own engineering wall? The deeper implications of Louis Hamilton's unheard message to his engineer extend far beyond the four corners of a radio log. It has now evolved into a subject of intense scrutiny within the paddock and even among psychological analysts who specialize in high-performance environments. What has captured particular attention is the tone of his voice, described by those with access to the raw audio as a mix of measured frustration and piercing clarity. This was not the voice of a pilot losing his temper after a tactical mishap. It was, rather, a carefully chosen moment to express a more profound dissatisfaction. Several experts have since pointed out that Hamilton has historically avoided confrontational language over the team radio, preferring private discussions to manage internal disputes. That is what makes this instance so significant. According to a former communication strategist who worked closely with the Brackley team, such messages are almost never spontaneous. They are calculated, especially when coming from someone as experienced and media-aware as Hamilton. When Louis speaks, he is fully aware that every word is being recorded and archived, the strategist explained. If he lets something slip over the radio, it is because he wants it to be heard, even if it never makes the broadcast feed. The mystery, however, lies in the reason it remained hidden. Was it the team that suppressed the audio to protect internal cohesion? Or was it a directive from higher up in the organization, fearful of sparking controversy? In either case, the absence of transparency has only fed more speculation. Adding fuel to the fire, an anonymous source from inside Mercedes has hinted that the message may have been linked to a vetoed setup request that Hamilton pushed for during simulator sessions weeks earlier. If true, this suggests a deeper disconnect between what the pilot feels inside the car and what the engineers are willing, or allowed, to adjust. The fallout from this moment is already reshaping conversations inside other teams, who are watching closely to see whether Hamilton will escalate his concerns or revert to the role of internal diplomat. Regardless of what comes next, one thing is clear. Lewis Hamilton's unheard message was not simply a moment of frustration. It was a signal, calculated and deliberate, aimed directly at the nerve center of Mercedes' decision-making. As the paddock whispers grow louder and the mystery around Lewis Hamilton's silenced radio message deepens, the situation has sparked a wider debate that now involves not only engineers and strategists, but also executives and public relations professionals across the sport. According to internal reports leaked to independent outlets, the suppressed message may have touched on what some insiders are calling unauthorized experimentation with software mapping, a sensitive subject that has historically been cloaked in secrecy within Mercedes. If Hamilton indeed referenced such matters during his message, even indirectly, it would suggest that he is no longer willing to play the part of silent collaborator. That possibility has alarmed more than just his own camp. Analysts at Formula Raisonnable, a respected technical journal based in Alemania, have already linked the context of Hamilton's tone to subtle changes in steering feedback and energy recovery profiles that were introduced without a full consensus among the team's senior drivers. If Hamilton believes his car was altered in ways that compromised his control or contradicted his input, then the implications reach beyond simple miscommunication. They enter the realm of philosophical rift between driver trust and team autonomy. This erosion of trust is not without precedent, but rarely has it surfaced so plainly in a driver of Hamilton's stature. He is not a young pilot fighting for relevance. He is a decorated veteran with a legacy on the line. For him to risk rocking the internal structure of Mercedes, even subtly, speaks volumes about the gravity of his frustration. At the same time, the engineer in question, whose name has not yet been confirmed in connection to this specific message, has reportedly been asked to limit external communications, another sign that damage control measures are being quietly enacted behind closed doors. Curiously, while Mercedes has remained silent in public, an ex-technical director with past ties to the team appeared on a podcast just days ago, suggesting that communication lockdowns usually happen only when the team knows the pilot's version will resonate with the public. In other words, the silence itself may be a quiet admission that Hamilton's concerns hold weight. The power dynamic between a 7-time world champion and his engineering staff is delicate at the best of times. But when a pilot of Hamilton's experience decides to go off script, even if only for a few sentences, the aftershocks are felt throughout the entire sport. What remains to be seen is whether this moment is a contained flashpoint, or the first sign of a larger unraveling. With speculation at an all-time high, the real question now is, what comes next for Lewis Hamilton and the structure around him? Behind the smiles and the polished post-session interviews, something undeniably deeper has been set in motion. Those close to the Mercedes inner circle suggest that trust between Hamilton and certain technical figures is fraying. But what makes this moment particularly explosive is not just the message itself, but the deliberate decision to suppress it, a move that insiders say was not taken lightly and may have required executive-level approval. This raises alarming ethical questions about internal censorship and transparency within the team. For a sport that sells itself on speed, precision, and human-machine harmony, the idea that a driver's message, especially one as significant as Hamilton's, could be selectively hidden from the public and possibly even from official documentation, strikes at the heart of fan trust. Moreover, this incident arrives at a time when Hamilton is said to be considering his long-term future. As he continues to reflect on his legacy, such betrayals, subtle or overt, could influence whether he chooses to further entrench himself within the Mercedes structure or seek alignment elsewhere, perhaps in a team more willing to offer him full engineering transparency. Some speculate that this situation could accelerate a quiet exodus of staff loyal to Hamilton, those who believe in putting driver input above algorithmic control. Meanwhile, rival teams are watching with keen interest. FERRARI, in particular, is rumored to be analyzing this communication breakdown closely, as they position themselves to attract talent disillusioned by internal mismanagement. But beyond all the politics and technical jargon lies a simpler truth. For a man like Lewis Hamilton, whose greatness has been forged through precision, discipline, and relentless self-awareness, being ignored, or worse, silenced, is not just a professional insult, it is a personal betrayal. Whether or not the full content of his unheard message ever reaches the public, its echo has already created a fracture that no software update or media statement can erase. The team can try to control the narrative, but the silence speaks louder. And Hamilton, more than anyone, knows how to turn silence into revolution.